Okay, we are recording now. Yeah. So if you remember last time where we left off, we just finished our confirmatory factor analysis. So let's go pull that up. I have too many files. CFA file. Okay, so this is where we were at. Now, if you remember when we ran it and we looked at all of our estimates were good. And then we also looked at our model fit measure. And then all of our model fit was excellent. Everything was good. So at this point, we have the ability to now move on and start doing our actual SEM model and start looking at the analysis. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can start by just bringing in all new data, but I just like using this right here. So first thing that I'll do is just save this as a new name. So we'll call this all right, we'll just call this SEM1. All right, so now what we need to do is basically move it into what our model looks like. So first thing we're gonna do is go through and delete all these the variances, or the whatever they're called, covariances. All right. So we know willingness to fly is going to be on the right side. So we can just rotate the latent factors over there. And then we could move these however we want to. I'll put FA on the bottom and perceived corona threat on top, put PSS on the left. Now, if you notice, WTF7 is on the top and not 1. If you click on this button right here, and click it like a few times, it'll reorder them and put them in order. Same thing for corona threat. You want it to read left to right. So now it reads left to right. Then we can move. If you click on this preserve symmetry button, it'll move the entire thing. In case y'all were wondering how to do that.
Oh my goodness, I was absolutely wondering how to do that. Thank you very, very much. I went through and I highlighted every single individual thing. And then I watched James Gaskin's video again. I'm like, how is he moving it all together? And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm just going to highlight everything and then press the little red truck. So, okay, it's that one. Brilliant. Thank you. That would have saved me a lot of time.
Yeah, and then you can also like grab these individual ones and move them around. So if you want to just like resize these things, it'll keep the structure the same. So
that is very, very, very snazzy.
I won't worry about making it look super pretty because I already have one that's super pretty for us. But basically, you just move those around and get them lined up nicely. And then, so we have our basic items out here. So we know that these are our 4 things. And now we need to just draw our path based upon our hypotheses. I probably should have kept that open. Let me open that back up. All right, so this was our original model, so we can just copy our paths from there. So we need one from PSS going to WTF. So we just grab the arrow and just drag it over. And then we got one from perceived corona into WTF. one from FA into WTF. And then we need to add gender on here. So easiest way to add gender is if you click on this button right here, list variables and data set. It lists all the variables that are linked to your data set. And then you just come over here, take gender, and boop, drag and drop. Now gender's in your model. As simple as that. And then we got 3 arrows coming from gender. So just grab the arrows and drag them. The magic wand will tidy things up and make it look prettier. But not all things, but yeah. So now we got our basic paths done. And then at this point, that's pretty much the main thing that we have to do. And then we can actually start running our SEM and looking to see what's going on. I'll show you how to do a couple other things here in a minute. If we were going to use gender as a grouping variable versus a predictor, I'll show you how that's done. But at this point, we want to go into our analysis properties. And then for your output, basically just the same stuff. You want to make sure your indices are there, residuals, standardized estimates, covariances. The modification indices, you can keep it 40. And then we don't need bootstrapping right now, but we may later. So at that point, now we just click calculate estimates and it runs. And then it's going to tell you that they're endogenous, but you have no residual error. If you remember back to any of James Gaskin videos, any endogenous variable has to have an associated error term. So basically just click on this button right here and you just add a dot to each of those. You also need to name these or else you're going to get an error when you run it that says you have unnamed variables because it can't do the covariance matrices if they're not named. So there's a plugin that James Gaskin has that says like name parameters are named unobserved variables. But for us, since these are going to be residuals, the best way to do it is just come in here and label them R1 and then R2, R3, and R4. It doesn't really matter what order they're in. You just have to have them.
There were two boxes there. What's the difference between variable label and variable name?
I don't know. So that's the caption of it, and this is the label of it. So when you hover over it, so test. So when you hover over it, it should say like test.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But maybe not. It's not doing anything. I don't know what that's for. I know that the variable label, when we start looking at mediation, we have to be able to name the variables. But I don't know why it does that. I've noticed that some of my windows are different than some of James Gaskin's videos. I don't know if I clicked a setting somewhere that added more things. Like he doesn't have this 0, which is like I think the mean. But mine lists the means on all of these, which I don't know why. All right, so now that we added those, now we click run. 3 variables are unnamed. What's unnamed? Oh, I guess you got to name it the variable name, not the label. Now it runs and you don't get any errors. So again, click standardized estimates. You can start seeing your pass. And the first thing that we need to do is start looking at model fit. So click on our little window. James Gaskin does have this cool plugin that's called Model Fit Measures. And then you click on that and it brings up an Internet Explorer page and it tells you exactly what your model looks like. Unless you want to go look through everything and find it yourself, which is perfectly fine as well. So if we go back to our data, I started doing this. So these are the model fits for our first one. And you can see that we still have quite a few things that are not good. But the good thing about SEM is that you don't have to have all these perfect in order to select your final model.
Sean, where was this chart again? Did you send this to us? Or is that in the Teams?
I don't know. I can send it to you right now.
Okay. So I remember we looked at this before when we were looking like another paper.
Yeah, I have a just a blank workbook that I use. All right, I sent it in chat.
Okay.
All right, so now we know that our model fit is not great. So now we need to do the same thing that we do in CFA and start looking at the indices and figure out what is going on. So go back here. And we can see on our indices, the biggest thing is there's two things that are highly correlated, R1 and R2. However, if you correlate the two error terms, your thing will not run. So these two covariates don't matter, so don't worry about that. Then the next thing you want to look at is the regression weights. So these are unrealized paths. So these are the things that we did not hypothesize that could significantly change our model. If you look, so perceived stress on perceived corona threat. So this is saying, the more stressed you are, the higher threat you view corona, COVID as. Higher perceived stress, the more familiar you are with aviation. That one doesn't really make sense. Higher perceived coronavirus threat is PSS. So those are the exact same, just opposite, but this one has the higher value. So we'd want to look at PSS to PCT instead of PCT to PSS. And then the last one is familiarity with aviation on perceived stress scale. So the more familiar you are with aviation, the less or the more or less stressed you are, which doesn't make sense by literature means, because stress should have nothing to do with, or your familiarity with aviation should have nothing to do with perceived stress over the last 30 days. Since our scenario was not specific to, the perceived stress was not specific to flying, it was just how you felt over the last 30 days. So the only thing that we can really do in here is add this path, PSS to PCT. So we'll just come in and we got to click back on the down arrow so you can draw on it again. And then we're going to go from PSS to PCT. So now we're saying that PSS impacts PCT. So now basically we just run it again. And then same thing. Let's go back and look. So our model fit, let's go look at our model fit. So we got excellent, excellent, terrible, excellent, and acceptable. So everything besides the standardized R-bar is good, which means that this is probably as good as we're going to get on this model, because they say in order to improve it, to remove PCT3. However, PCT3 only has 3 observed variables. When you take a latent construct and remove it, take it down to 2 observed variables, you start messing with the validity of the model. So since that is not the best way to do it, this will probably be our last run and our last model. So these are what the numbers look like. You can see our relative fit. We have pretty good relative fit. We got a good p-value and we have a good C-min.
Can I ask you a question? Did that like automatically update?
This?
Yeah,
No, this is stuff I did before.
got it.
I
Okay.
went in and input all these
Manually
numbers.
put those. Got it. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so I get those from this table right here. So basically I
Okay.
just come in.
Model plan. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I just come in and manually add all these numbers to the table, and
Okay.
then it'll color coordinate. So this is our model fit again, and we look at our modification indices. So now we see that there's only one covariate between R1 and R4, which we said we can't do. And then only two small regression weight changes. And again, PSS on FA and PCT on FA, which both of those don't make sense because neither of these should impact how familiar you are with aviation. So since we don't have literature to support either of those, at this point, we can basically just say that our SEM model is complete. And adding PSS to PCT gave us our finalized model. Now, what does this model mean? So this is where we actually have to go in and start looking at our regression weights. So if we go back to our output and we go to the estimates, go to scalars. So this regression weights table, this is going to tell us everything that we need to know. And this is going to help us identify our hypotheses. So you can see gender on PSS is non-significant. So this is your p-value. So gender on perceived stress was not supported. So gender did not influence perceived stress one way or the other. Same thing with gender on perceived COVID threat. Males and females both felt the same about COVID, apparently. It was not significant. However, there was an effect of gender on FA, and we can see that our estimate is negative 2.80. We have gender 0 as males and 1 as females. So as we move from 1 to 0, so we're going down. So as you move from female to male, you become more familiar with aviation. And we hypothesized that males would be more familiar with aviation. So we were able to support that hypothesis. And then the next one was PSS on PCT. It was significant with a high estimate. So this influenced that. This was the unrealized path that we had. So this one was highly significant, had a high effect. PSS on willingness to fly. You can see that the perceived stress estimate was positive. I think that's what I reported, right? Okay. Did I do it wrong? That got me second guessing. PSS, okay, yeah. So we said that PSS would have a negative effect on willingness to fly, but it has a positive effect on willingness to fly. And then perceived COVID threat on willingness to fly, we hypothesized there'd be a negative effect, statistically significant, and negative 3.75. And then familiar with aviation on willingness to fly, we said there would be a positive effect. The more familiar you are with aviation, the more willing you are to fly. Significant and positive. So everyone see how to read that?
So question, like, so some of those are like not very big, right? So when you're talking like PSS to willingness to fly, it's like 0.19, right? So even though it's significant, do you say anything about the like actual weight of it or no?
Yes. So there is, so this is, you can think of this as just a linear thing. So as PSS increases by 1, your perceived COVID threat or your willingness to fly would increase by 0.194.
Right.
So I mean, there's still, I mean, I think any
It
number there.
increases significant, but like it's slight. I'm just curious if that ever comes up or no.
I don't know. I'm sure I've asked that question. I just can't remember.
That's okay. And then as you're going down, so like you typically don't talk about like the willingness to fly with like 1, 2, 3, like the scale with actually the different variables.
Yeah, we don't talk about any of this stuff.
Okay.
So this is just all the scales.
It's like the main constructs, I guess.
Yeah, this is the effect of the scale on the observed variable.
Got it. Okay.
And they should all be really high since they're all observed variables. of that total thing. All right, and then we get into your standardized regression weights. Again, this is just another way to look at the different numbers and how they correlate. But the next thing we need to worry about is our R squared. Which is I'm trying to find my R squared table. Did I not include it? So your R squared table should say squared multiple correlations. I think I did not include it in the analysis. Let me go back and make sure I include it. There it is, squared multiple correlations. Now we run it again. Now we look at our estimates and then our scalar, and we should have your R squared, squared multiple correlations. So this is the amount of variance that we explained. So willingness to fly, we were able to explain 50.7% of the variance of willingness to fly, which is great. We weren't really looking at these other ones, but you can see that we also were able to explain about 31% of the variance of perceived COVID threat. And that's after we added the PSS in. So, but notice we didn't explain any of the variance of PSS because we didn't have any inputs into PSS, right? Besides gender. So. But yeah, that's the number that we're concerned about. And then these are the numbers that we report for our hypotheses. And you'll do the same thing on the assignment for Dr. Trong. You'll make a table that looks like this with the hypothesis, the relationship, and then talk about the weights with the p-values, and then say if they're supported or not, and then any respecified paths.
Okay. So the respecified path, you identify that down here then, correct? Like you have to basically do the model again, not do the model again, but show it.
Yeah, so I added it as a dash line.
Okay.
And then I put the non-hypothesized path as shown as a dash line.
Can you do that? And so you can do that in Amos. I haven't gotten there yet. So
no, I don't do this in Amos. I actually use PowerPoint.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so what I do is I come in here and I actually will take the model, paste it in here, and then add the text boxes. And then
For the hypothesis and everything.
Yeah, so all these boxes I add in there because you can't add those and make them look decent on Amos. And then so this dash line, I actually just put a ton of little boxes to cover.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Not the best way to do it, but
It's okay. Judgment free.
it looks good on the
It
final
looks great.
product.
No, it looks fantastic, but I was like, I didn't know how that works. So, okay. But so in your Amos model though, it's actually a straight line because we had to specify it, correct? And then you just identify that we weren't suspecting that in the results and then modify it, right?
Yeah, so in our
Okay.
trials, we put that, we added that measure and that improved our model fit and gave
Got
us
it.
our final model fit. So even though all these are not there, we're still accepting this as our final SEM model.
Okay.
And it'll be fine. Because
Okay.
SEM is so like interpretive that you know, some people might think that this is more than enough for model fit, where other people might say you have nowhere close to model fit. So
Okay.
And the SRMR, what's that indicative of?
the squared, the SRMR, the
Yeah,
standardized?
over to the left. Yes, it's the only value that's in red. Over to the left hand side in the box. Yeah, here, 0.1081.
Yeah, so there's a plugin for it. I forget exactly what it means. There's a hold on. Was it S?
But even though it's in the red, it's one of the most it's one of the least important measures, which is why we can ignore it.
No, I wouldn't say it's the least important by any means. It's just so it's the squared standardized root mean squared residual. So it's an absolute measure of fit. And it doesn't matter how complex the model is. Value less than 0.8 is considered a good fit. So it's above that, but that doesn't mean that our model is not a good fit because we're only missing one of these values. Nowhere in SEM does it say you have to like exactly get every single measure to have a good model fit. You have to do the best that you can based upon the data that you have to get a good model fit.
Okay, I like that. I'm going to use that. I did the best that I could with the data that I had.
I mean, that's really what it
I'm
is.
definitely going to use that.
When we go look at Gaskin's plugin, it tells us to remove PC3T, PC3T. So let's go and remove that and let's see what happens. So when we start removing stuff like this and then running it, let's go look at our model fit. So our model fit actually, I don't even know if that's much better because we went from excellent, excellent, terrible, excellent to acceptable, excellent, terrible, excellent, acceptable.
So the SMR is, and it still didn't change.
The SRMR did not change. The CMIN got worse.
Yeah.
Now they're saying
remove PCT2.
PCT2. So now I think if you do that, then your model won't run. Oh, I guess it does run. So let's go look at that one. I bet you it's probably going to say remove PCT1.
Yep, sure.
Okay.
And you can see the value still hasn't changed. So now our model is just getting destroyed.
Yes.
Now we have, now this entire thing is gone. So now we're just left with this. So, yeah, we could run this, but now what is this going to tell us? We took out an entire variable and our SRMR is still bad.
It still hasn't changed. Yeah. Okay.
Now it's saying remove FA5. So
okay,
I mean,
so it's slowly saying take away arbs of your model until you have nothing left, and then and only then will it be perfect.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, so you just got to figure out when you should stop, basically, and when you think it's good. For our project, I think at this point, we're good right here. It looks good, and we have a decent model fit. We don't have perfect model fit, but it's, you know,
it's okay. I mean, it's better than it was when you take things out. So
yeah. So I mean, we're still getting some good areas. I'm sure that we could find literature to say why it's okay to not have SRMR. But this is just an assignment for Dr. Trong's class. It probably really doesn't matter. We can submit this for publication and see what they say.
Okay. And when we went in to look at, no, was it model fit or was it measures? It threw up PCT on PSS and PSS on PCT. Why have we chosen to ignore that relationship?
Okay, so that is what I did talk about that. So let's go in and delete this one first, and then run the model again. So
Oh, no, sorry, hang on. I'm messing it up. Not PSS and PCT. I meant on willingness to fly. Sorry. PCT on willingness to fly and PE on familiarity. Yeah. PSS on familiarity and FA on familiarity. Okay, hang on. First, my first question is, in that window, if nothing comes up, no arrows, no relationships, then what does that mean?
in what window? This window?
Yes. If it's all
So-
blank, there's nothing under covariances. Actually it says MI par change. If it says MI par change under all three headings, what does that mean?
That's just the header for the table. It just means that you have nothing that was identified as a modification to make your model better.
Ah, okay. So you have no modifications, therefore you don't need to change your model.
Yeah, theoretically, yeah. Is your model fit good though?
Yes, I want to say yes.
I mean, if your model fits good and nothing shows up on this page, then you're good to go. If we go back and look at our CFA, we still had a bunch of stuff showing up on that screen, but we had to decide when we were going to stop
Okay.
doing it. So one other thing I was going to show y'all before y'all leave, if you want, is how to do mediation.
Okay. Oh no, sorry. PSS on familiarity.
Because that wouldn't make, that's not supported by the literature.
Yeah, we don't have any literature to support that. If your stress increases, you become more familiar with aviation.
Okay.
These
Yes.
two
Okay. Because
items
you've
are
because
not
you've
related
said
at all.
okay.
So when we go look at our actual instrument that we used, we can see that they were giving these three scenarios at the same time in random order. So they got, during your last month, how do you feel this way? And then there was a different scale, how familiar you are with aviation. So these two have no type of correlation with them. So we don't have any literature or any way to support PSS going to FA.
Okay.
All right. So one thing I was going to show y'all is mediation. So this is an advanced SEM topic that I don't think Charles covers in his class, but
Ready for it.
it's a good tool to use. So basically, what we want to look at, we found this unrealized path from PSS to PCT. And so now if we look at these arrows, we see PSS goes to PCT goes to willingness to fly. So now we want to see if PSS goes to WTF, but it's mediated by perceived COVID threat. So does COVID actually influence this direct path? So to do that, basically what you have to do is come down here and there's a button. If you just click down here, it's going to allow you to select an estiman, and you need to go download James Gaskin's estimans and find the group differences. With that, you also have to come in here and label the path that you're going to compare. So you need one labeled A and one labeled B. So it's going to compare A to B. So it's going to look at PSS to WTF with this item in between. And then basically you just run the analysis. Now, when you run this analysis, you have to do bootstrapping because you're doing a mediation analysis. So if you actually go look at the bootstrapping, it runs 20,000 bootstraps. So it runs this model 20,000 different times to get a better estimate of this stuff. Now, when we go in here and we look at our modification indices, we're going to have on estimates, we're going to have a new item called user defined estimands, and it's going to show A to B being 1.37. Now, if you come down here and you click over here, you can click on the standard errors, and you can see that our p-value is 0.01, and our estimate is 1.373. So that's saying it's statistically significant, and it has a positive effect on that relationship. So let's look at standardized, not unstandardized. That'll make it easier to understand. Oh, it's the same thing. Okay, so anyways, as 1.37 statistically significant. So now this is saying that parameter in between A and B mediates this relationship. So perceived COVID threat positively mediates individuals' perceived stress on willingness to fly. So basically, if they have a higher stress because of COVID, they're going to be less willing, or it'll significantly impact the relationship with willingness to fly. And I'm really confused because I did this yesterday and I got a negative. I don't know why it's positive now. Am I using the right estimate? No, I'm using the right estimate. Let's see. Oh, okay, there we go. I was using the wrong estimate. So this is what it should be, negative. So it's a significant and negative value. So your perceived stress is negatively mediated by perceived COVID threat. So if someone has a higher perceived COVID threat, their stress is going to be, or they're going to be less willing to fly if their perceived COVID threat is higher. Does that make sense?
So the relationship you're talking about here is PSS to WTF, but PCT is interacting with it.
Yeah, it's causing a change in this relationship, a
Got it.
negative change, because they view COVID. If they view COVID as a threat, it has a negative relationship on stress to willingness to fly.
Okay.
Which I ran this analysis because our initial model showed that PSS had a positive impact on willingness to fly. But when you mediate with perceived COVID threat, it actually turns that relationship around.
That 100% would make sense though, right? So as we talked about PSS increasing as increases your WTF, like that, I think we found enough literature, and Catherine did, to support that because of kind of all this stuff. We're not capturing why you're stressed. But then if you throw in that PCT, that I think that's an interesting take. So I like that. And that can only be done with bootstrapping though?
To do the mediation analysis, yes.
Yeah.
It has to do bootstrapping because it has to run so many different things
Got it.
with the estimate. But James Gaskin has tons of videos on how to do this stuff. So I've done mediation analyses on all the SIM that I've done except for this one. And I didn't do SIM because Dr. Trong doesn't make it a requirement in his class to mediation. So, but it just adds some other interesting facts into your analysis.
Okay, are we, oh no, sorry. Okay, you said you're not going to put that in the results because he doesn't require it.
Well, yeah, and we didn't hypothesize it. So part of the issue is if we just add it in now, the mediation, then we're just hypothesis guessing, and it kind of ruins our study because we can go and find every single weird interaction in this model just by playing around with it enough. But if we didn't hypothesize it, there's no point in adding it to the model. The only thing that you add in SEM is the unrealized paths that increase your model fit, which is why we added this
Okay.
individual path.
Yes.
But we don't look at any type of mediation or moderation effects.
Okay.
And then if y'all want to, I don't know if y'all need to go, but I can show you how to do like the simple invariance testing. If you actually have groups versus, so if we were looking at a difference between genders versus if gender influences these, I can show you how to do that real fast.
And that's how you split it into male and female.
Yeah. For this one, it'd be male and female, but you can split it into any binary variable that you have. Or you can actually do more than binary variables. If you have, 3 categories, you can split it into 3 different groups. However, the human mind can only comprehend comparison on 2 groups. So you'll have to do pairwise comparisons if you have 2 more groups, if you have more than 2 groups.
Okay.
Let's see. There we go. All right. So this model, you can see we don't have gender as a variable, but we have 2 groups called male and female. So inside here, when you actually go select your data, you actually have to come in here, select male, select your grouping variable, and then we're going to group by gender. And again, this could be any binary variable or categorical variable. And then you assign the group value to the first group, which would be 0 for males. And then you actually have to come in here, and this will be blank. And you actually have to come in here and select the data set again, and then add your grouping variable again for gender, and then assign it the other group variable, which would be 1. And then now you see we have our 2 separate groups set up. So now we have male and females up here. You also, if you double click on that, you can add new groups or delete groups. So you'll have to add male and female up here as well. So now when we actually run the analyses, you can see we get all the same kind of numbers. However, when we start looking at our analysis, one thing to keep in mind is that despite the fact that we're looking at 2 separate groups, you're only going to have a single model fit. So when you go to like plugins and look at your model fit measures, this is going to be for the overall model, and it includes both groups. There's not an individual model fit for males and an individual model fit for females, if that makes sense. But when you look at your analyses, you can come in here and see that up here we have group 1. Oh, this is not the right one. There we go. So now you see how we have males and females down here. So if we go to model fit, notice we have a single model fit and you can't select male or female. However, when we start going to look at our estimates and looking at our regression weights, you select male, you see regression weights for males, and you click on females, and then you'll have your regression weights for females. So this is showing you, like, this is the male group on these individual items, and this is the female group on these individual items. So one of the complicated things that you have to do when you start using grouping variables is called invariance testing. And so there's 3 types of invariance testing: configurable, metric, and scalar. I haven't even attempted to do scalar because it's very, very complicated. Metric, I cannot get to work on this data set. I can get the configurable invariance testing done. So to do that, all you have to do is you have to like unconstrain both groups So you actually have to add like extra variables. And then add some, there's a bunch of different things you have to do. But basically, you'll basically run it unconstrained, and then it will get you a new model fit. And then when you look at the model fit with the unconstrained groups, then you can tell if you have configurable invariance testing. Let me see, I think I actually have it saved. 02 CFL test. Yeah, so
Sean, have you done this in any of your other studies and found that there was a difference between male and female, or that there was a difference between different categorical variables?
I have not done any studies like this because it's extremely complicated. Invariance testing is probably one of the hardest things to do when it comes to SEM. Like even James Gaskin stumbles on it and has a hard time explaining it because it's that difficult.
He's so wonderful when he stumbles in his YouTube videos. Honestly, he just makes you want to watch them more and more and more. Like, he's so engaging with his audience. It's really lovely to watch. Like, he's so genuine.
Yeah.
You know, when he does something, he's like, hallelujah. It's really cute.
Yeah, I like him. Dr. Winter told me I can't use him as my outside person on my dissertation though.
Oh, you contacted him?
No, I
James
was joking.
Gaskin.
I was joking.
Oh.
I was like, hey, I'm going to use Gaskin since he's a SIM expert.
Did you get
And
jealous?
Dr. Winter was like, please don't do that. It's so complicated.
I'm only laughing because I tried to contact him on LinkedIn, but his LinkedIn bio says, I don't check LinkedIn. I don't use LinkedIn. If you know, so I was like, oh no, that's just why I'm asking and laughing.
I would email his BYU email. He probably checks that.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a common latent factor. So this is a test that you can run to see if there's something common among all this stuff. And there's a plugin for it, of course. This specific bias test. But basically, I went through all the invariance testing. I can't find the model that I actually saved with it. Gender group, CFL, is it this one? Nope, that's not it. That's CFA multi-group. Okay. That was not it. Invariance testing. That's the model fit. That's not the invariance testing. SEM, gender. Oh, maybe this one's it. Nope, that has nothing in it. All right. Well, anyways, I ruined this for you. But I'll show you the notes that I came up with and all the stuff that I had to do to try to do this invariance testing. But you had to constrain the factors to 1 and then use the invariance tool and then run the analysis, look at output, and you have to do model comparison. So you get this table. So this assumes that the model is unconstrained and you want a statistically non-significant test. If it's significant, it means that there is no difference between the two groups. So I could not get the metric invariance test to work by splitting this data set into males and females. But he said that most journals, as long as you put that you pass configurable invariance, then you're good to go. And I was able to do that. with both groups unconstrained, it passed model fit. And that's all you have to do. So. Any other questions that y'all have?
No, I really appreciate this, Sean. I'm gonna like digest this a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Sean. You love